Good morning, everyone. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, we had a great first day of discussion and information about the various aspects of marijuana legalization. For those of you who were here yesterday, welcome back. I'm Daniel Weinstock. I'm the director of the Institute for Health and Social Policy here at McGill University. Before I get started, I would like, as we did yesterday, to recognize and acknowledge the fact that McGill is situated on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. The IHSP, and I'm sure that I speak for everybody here, including our partner, the McGill Institute for the Study of Canada, represented by my colleague Andrew Potter, honors and respects the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this territory on which we gather today for our exchanges. We're going to start today, just to give you a rundown of the day is going to be bookended by keynote addresses by people who were key actors in the development of innovative, forward-looking drug policy in two countries that Canada has looked at and should continue to look towards for inspiration about how to move forward with marijuana legalization, and those countries are Uruguay and Portugal. In the middle, we will have talks that will deepen our knowledge of some of the data that's been coming out of some of the jurisdictions, both sovereign nations like Uruguay and Portugal, but also American states that have moved forward with legalization. We'll have a couple of panels on the economic dimensions and implications of legalization. And in the middle of the day, we're going to be hearing from community leaders. Just near here from the Mohawk Nation, from Montreal itself. Mayor Sue Montgomery from NDG Côte-des-Neiges is going to be here, and Senator Vern White will be participating in a panel on community leaders. So we have a very rich and full day, and so I wouldn't want to wait any longer to get it started. Our first speaker today is Leonardo Costa Franco. I'd like to particularly acknowledge him because his road to Montreal in the last 48 hours or so was truly heroic. 48 hours ago, we got an email from him telling us that he had been declined access to the airplane that was supposed to bring him on the very, very long journey from Montevideo, Uruguay to Montreal because of a mix-up to do with names on the passport and the ticket. And rather than do what most of us would have done, which is to say, well, you know, that didn't work out, I'm going home now. He waited until we were able to find another flight for him, some reasonable people who were able to see that though the names weren't exactly in the same order, we were actually talking about the same person, and made a very, very long journey from Montevideo through Miami and Philadelphia, and finally here quite late yesterday afternoon. So we owe him a huge debt of gratitude for having made it all the way here. Mr. Leonardo Costa Franco area of practice is tax, corporate, and banking law. He counsels the capital market and financial entities on compliance with regulations and prevention of money laundering. He's got a very long CV, but most relevant to us is the fact that he represented his country, Uruguay, before international organization in the field of taxes, the fight against drugs, corruption, money laundering, and terrorist financing. He was a member of the Joint Commission on Trade and Investment between Uruguay and the United States of America. He was also the chair of the National Drug Council of Uruguay. He was a member of the tax departments of Ferrere Abogados, I get to practice my Spanish a little bit, and PricewaterhouseCoopers Uruguay from 1992 to 1999. He was a legal and social consultant for the United Nations Development Program, the IDB, and several foreign governments in his area of specialization. Please join me in welcoming Leonardo Costa Franco to give the morning keynote. Thank you very much.
So, many thanks for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here in Montreal. My first time in Montreal was 20 years ago. I was a law student at Harvard University, and part of that, of the trip, was to be here in Montreal to study the Quebec tax system, which was different from the Canadian tax system, what these guys are doing. So it was a great opportunity to meet people here in Canada at that time. Then life goes on, and I've been here for a couple of times, fortunately visiting for sightseeing. So why I'm here? Let me tell you my main field of activity and what I do for living is basically taxes. You know, there's a saying that says that for nobody is free from debt and from taxes. But basically in the year 2000, I was involved in the government of Uruguay. Former President Valle is a family that ran Uruguay presidency for a couple of years from 2000. The first time was 1870, and then there were Valles everywhere, 4 President Valles. So he was very, very liberal, so do I. And he put me in the undersecretary of the presidency, which is the deputy chief of staff. I was 30 years old, 33 years old. He was crazy. Me too, but he was more crazy than me. And during that time, the people in the presidency said, oh, you need to be in charge also for you will be the czar of drugs. I'm not a czar, I'm a liberal. So, and you know, sometimes the government of the United States, when they made this kind of annual report, they put the czar of drugs in Uruguay. And I called them, please don't put me czar. I hate czar. And so I was involved in this journey. And once I started, my previous director of the drug commission was pro-prohibition. I say, why? And then I talked to the president and say, you know, we have problem with people that is getting hepatitis, I don't know how you say, hepatitis. So we need to explore some harm reduction programs. He said, do it. Then he said in a conference, instead of harm reduction, why don't go directly to the legalization? And the people say, why this guy is doing? The people from Vienna called me, a very nice guy. He called me and said, what are you doing? You are in violation of the UN Convention. I mean, this is free speech. We are not doing anything. We are only trying to advocate for a change. Then I've been in Vienna, and they say, you cannot do that. My last intervention in Vienna was basically that the world was changing. Remember that year 2003, I think it was, the Convenio Marco of Tobacco, the Tobacco Convention, put what was free to regulated policies on tobacco industry. And I mentioned that for me, in the next years, we will see a regulation in all markets. No more prohibition, but only regulation. There was a guy from the US say, you are crazy. We are not allowed to do that. So it was my last intervention. After that, I go into be in the private sector. To be honest, I didn't care. But I was very, very much indeed thinking that we need to change from a regulation in all markets. Okay. Then new government started. They continue the same policy. They call me sometimes, please help us you are a lawyer, so help us in some discussion, until what happened in year 2010. There was a crime committed in a store. The television showed that terrible crime when a small guy killed the owner of the restaurant. And there was a Ministry of Defense He used to be in prison for, they call terrorista, because he was against the democracy in the years 60s. And he said, we need to change the law. We need to legalize marijuana. To be honest, I thought at that time, he's crazy. It's impossible to do so. So 2 months later, the government sent a bill with an only article saying, we want to discuss the legalization and regulation of marijuana. That was the article. Fortunately, there were a movement in that times, some, they say, self-growers, self-consumption. I mean, a lot of discussion, so we passed the bill. Let me show, basically, what for me was the key for the change. The key of the change, sorry, it's in Spanish, I cannot translate, but I will try to do so. The key of the change was the 1974 bill. Uruguay was the only country in the Americas that allows, without crime penalties or any kinds of sanctions, self-consumption or autoconsumo. And it says, will be exempt from any sanction that person who has a minimum quantity to be used for personal consumption. And that law was passed by the military government, who, to be honest, they weren't so liberal. But Uruguay had a long tradition of liberty, liberal rights, etc. So that was part of the beginning. We never put nobody in jail for autoconsumption, okay, for self-consumption. So with that law, we started in 2013 with the new law that is the 19172 and all the decrees that we are going to see right now. One last mention to this. When they start discussing all these changes, the UN, the JIFE, no? the authority of control of the UN conventions, called the government and say, you are in violation of the UN convention. Then they call me, and I prepare a paper. To be honest, I am not an expert in international law, but the challenge for me was great. I say, okay, I will do it. And I prepared a paper, basically the discussion between what are the conventions that we are dealing with. The UN convention, but the human rights conventions. So which one works more or less? The UN convention or the human rights conventions? And that was part of the pitch of Uruguay before the Vienna board in 2014. And basically what we tried to discuss was, okay, the human rights conventions are very important for Uruguay. And under our constitutions, the human rights are over any control. Article 10 of the Constitution, so we need to protect all human rights for consumers, for users, and for those who need cannabis for medical purpose. So we go with that speech, and to be honest, the UN authority thinks that we are in violation, but the good thing was that because times are changing, and the US had the problem that they have between the federal government and the state government, there was no more thing than a letter saying that Uruguay is in violation of the UN Convention, but no more than that. So that, for me, is a huge change in the environment of controlling the world. Fortunately, for me, the authorities of the UN Convention are losing power, and that is the reason why Uruguay, Portugal, and many of the US states are working in this new path of legalization. I would like to say more than legalization, regulation, because this is more a regulation rather than a legalization. Okay, let's see. Basically, the Congress approved in 2013, set the general framework of control and regulation of cannabis and all its derivatives, public health, reduction of damage and human rights perspective. That was basically the background of the law. Reduction of trafficking, small trafficking, etc. And creation of a new institution, which is, the name is IRCA. The IRCA is basically the authority of control of all the licenses in Uruguay. It's Institute for Regulation of Cannabis Control and Administration. Okay? Let's see basically what is IRCA does. IRCA is basically a non-public legal entity. It regulates the controls and activities related to cannabis, from the planting to the sale and the different uses, industrial, medicinal, research, and non-medical use. Promotes actions to reduce risk, damage, and public health in general, and advise the executive branch in all areas. Then we have over the IRCA is a board. It has a board, basically with the National Drug Secretary, the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fishing, because all the permits for planting are given by this ministry, the seeds control and other permits are given by this ministry, public health, because medicinal uses, Ministry of Social Development, basically for the reason was we are dealing with human rights, so do it with the Ministry of Development. And then you have a honorary national council with all the ministries. This used to be the Junta Nacional de Drogas, the one that I was in charge. We have basically three decrees. One for scientific research and medical uses. What it says basically is that regulates the planting, growing, harvesting, distribution, and commercialization on both psychoactive and non-psychoactive cannabis to be used exclusive in scientific research for production of vegetables or pharmaceutical specialties for medical use. Let me only explain something here. All this medical use was so slow. It was a lot of pressure from the medical societies. We have divided the medical societies. One that says marijuana or cannabis is great for some diseases. Others say, no, you are promoting drugs. So to be part of the slowdown process of the medical use was because of the break that some medicals in Uruguay put, especially in the area of psychiatrists and pediatrists. Pediatrists, you say, no? Okay. But now we have, the government approved some licenses, so we are going in this year to develop more and more medical uses. It needs to have approval from the IRCA. It needs approval from the Ministry of Health. We have right now 25 production projects or research projects are under evaluation, so slowly, but we started to do so. In order to invest in this area, you need to have a project, you need to develop a project with what you are going to do, from where you are going to have the seeds or the plantation, and moreover, you need to demonstrate that the money that you are going to put there is coming from legal sources, There is a very strict anti-money laundering control over that in order to avoid that any illegal money that could come from narco-traffic could be in this project. So we have 25 projects right now, which is not so much, but we started at least the process. Then we have the other one that is the industrial hemp. This is basic, I will say that the one that has more projects and the one that has more interest. Here we need to have 1% less than of THC. The control of that is very strict. You need to have less than 1%, and they control the plants, they control the flowers, etc. The authorization is given by the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fishing. It will depend on the final use of the product, that you can have only industrial hemp, or you can use it for other purpose like uses of consumption or whatever. So the hemp project, we have 11 licenses granted with more than 1,200 hectares. It's not so much, but there is a lot of interest. There is at least, I would say, $40 million investment in this area. For Uruguay, is a lot. We have only 3 million people. We have a small GDP. But for us, it's a great change. There is a lot of communities all over the country where these projects are growing and developing. We have some problems that we put it at the end. I will put it at the end. Then, non-medical use. Here you have basically the system. Self-growers, we have 8,400 and something. Acquirers is growing and growing, is 23,000 people. We started with, the first month was only 2 persons. And then you see a lot of people acquiring marijuana. You need a registry. You need to register your name, all your background, and before the authorities, and then you can buy the marijuana in pharmacies. Let me tell you that we have a prohibition for foreigners, for people that are not resident in Uruguay, basically, not foreigners. That is part of the assumption that if we allow non-resident to acquire before the pharmacies, probably we will have a marijuana tourism inside Uruguay. We have. But that was the reason, especially because Argentina at that time called the president and say, okay, be careful with that. We don't want to be any problem with you. So they put in the law that in order to acquire marijuana before the pharmacies, you need to be a resident in Uruguay. We are growing the residencies in Uruguay, not only for marijuana, because for tax purpose also, but the residents in Uruguay are growing every day. Then clubs, 90 clubs with 2,500 people. So I would say that right now we have 34,000 users of the cannabis industry. That is 1% of the population of Uruguay. This 1% of the population is based, I think, is the same 1% that in the former studies before this law was passed. They say Uruguay has a 1% of consumers of marijuana, from illegal marijuana at that time. So it wasn't a big change. Probably the people that are against this law say it's growing the consumption, and these are new consumers, not the old consumers. We don't know. But what is clear is, in my perspective, that this new law was not a big change in the consumption habits, but it was a change in the risk analysis of the consumers. I will explain. Before that law was passed, my son, for instance, 15 years old, he said, no, marijuana is, you need to be careful with marijuana. Right now, we say, marijuana. I will not smoke, but nobody will die because he's smoking marijuana. Cigarettes are more dangerous than marijuana. That is the feeling of the young people. Of course, if you are going to a soccer game or a jazz game, you will smoke marijuana, and the smell is all over. But to be honest, I don't think that this new law changes the habit of the people. Another important thing, before the law was passed, 60% of the population were against the law. Now, 40% of the population is against the law. That was a major change in the I would say, in the social humor of the people of the law. Then, evolution of the consumption in different sources. In this self-grower registry, this 8,400. In process avoidance is 41. Withdrawn because they violate some part of the law, 300. Rejected, 500. Pending, 24. Suspended, 1. So you will see that most of the people that are asking for being self-grower, they fulfill with the law, there is no problem. There were some cases where the judge in the interior of Uruguay especially, there was a guy with a license to be a self-grower, and there was not only one X number of plants, they have more. So this line between how many plants you can have was discussed, and the judge basically says, no, too many. Then the second level of the appeals court say, no, you need to interpret this law under the Constitution, which basically states that the liberty is all over the control. So we have some problems in the way the judges are looking the law and interpreting the law, but we say 3 years from now, we can say that we are doing well before the courts, pro-liberty assumption and pro-law, I would say, with no problems. So membership clubs, we have 87 clubs, rejected 13, so you have the numbers there. And now how the partners of these clubs, or the memberships of these clubs was growing, you will see that we have a huge growing in 2016, and now the curve is stabilized. We stabilize the numbers of membership. Then distribution in pharmacies. This is so 3 ways: self-growers, clubs, and pharmacies. Okay? Pharmacies. This was a mess in Uruguay. It started last year. 2 licenses for production and distribution, and this basically complete the cycle of tracking system from individuals to plant users. You can track where was planted that flower, who sell, who buys, and basically you have all the trazabilidad, we say. You can track everything from the seed to the user. with no possibility of violating that tracking system, okay? It's like when you say a package by DHL, you say the package is there, okay, it's the same. We have quality controls in the process and to the final product. A lot of information under control of the IRCA. Media campaigns, especially when they started the process, they have a media campaign saying, okay, marijuana consumption, the abuse of consumption is not good, et cetera, minor of 18 cannot buy, et cetera. The same campaigns that we have for alcohol or tobacco. It's the same. And I like that. Hannah is there. Hannah, when we started the process, I forgot to mention that, there was a committee. I was the only one that wasn't in the government. Hannah, of course, neither. But we say, okay, let's do it with control. Let's do it regulation. And it was a good job in order to support the law because it was the civil society that supports the law rather than any political party. So the campaign was good and is going well in TV, radio, web portals, etc. Acquirers in pharmacies. You will see that the number is going up and up. What is our problem in pharmacies? We have two big problems. First, distribution of the pharmacies. They are concentrated in Montevideo. And the second one is one of the major obstacles of the law is the financial inclusion of the pharmacies. I will discuss later that because for me, the biggest enemy of this law are not the politicians, are not the priests, are not the fathers or the mothers, are the banks. Just another thing, you will see how it's growing and growing and growing. The number of grams, I will leave this PPT here, so don't worry. We have purchase from March of this year was 7,900, so you see that we are growing. There is a funny thing. Because marijuana came to the pharmacies, for instance, Monday, you see a long line of people saying, waiting for buying the marijuana. And they send by WhatsApp, today we received, so come here. There is a WhatsApp line basically in the pharmacies for the acquirers say, we receive it, so come right now. This is the way they sell the marijuana. This is a package, a very nice package, where you can see here where you can track where it was planted, to what pharmacy, etc. 5 grams with a lot of warnings. This is the variedad alpha, 1. And this is the other, the back of the package. I know the ambassador of Uruguay told me, here in Canada, told me that the Canadian government is asking for some support on these packages, and they are having some meetings trying to explain all the way the pharmacies develop the package. So I think this is a quite interesting cooperation that Uruguay is having with Canada. And let's put at the end our major obstacle for this law, that is financial inclusion. What is basic, in a brief commentary, what is the problem? The problems are the correspondent banks of the US. They are dealing with the federal law. The federal law prohibits any transaction with marijuana or cannabis products, derivative from cannabis. So they called for cancel any correspondent relationship with banks that are working with any part of the cannabis industry. It could be hemp or it could be personal uses. So we have a law in Uruguay that says that every transaction should be passed through the banks. We have a law that says that you can work with marijuana or cannabis or hemp or whatever the uses you want to do for the cannabis derivatives. But we have the correspondent banks that says you cannot work with this industry. And that is a major obstacle for the hemp industry, for medical uses, and for personal use. We have lost some investment in Uruguay because we have some Canadians dealing with some project in Uruguay that they are not allowed to send money for in Uruguay. What they are doing, sometimes they lie. They say, no, I'm an agriculture project, and they send the money. If you say, no, I'm doing a cannabis project, they close the account. So where the discussion is right now, the Central Bank of Uruguay is discussing with the US authorities. As you may see, there is not so. The discussion is not in the same balance. We are a small country. Nobody cares if we don't have correspondent relationships. So for us, that Canada is involved in this marijuana legalization discussion or projects is very important. We have a bank, it's the Scotia Bank, which is a Canadian bank, that says, okay, but we are dealing with the US, so meanwhile we cannot open a bank account. So what we can do, and this is struggling the law, the projects, and the pharmacies. They are selling marijuana in cash. But you can sell marijuana in cash. What you cannot do is to have a hemp project in cash. You cannot have foreign investor. We have a lot of foreign investor going in Uruguay trying to get a license, which is 1 year the process. It's easy to have a license if you are serious, if you show that you have the authority to do so, the money is coming from legal sources, etc. But if you don't have banks, you don't have projects. The important is if you need to channeling all the transactions through this financial system. The information is transparent. Everybody knows that if you plant a seed where you are going to sell the product, you know where the anti-money laundering studies are doing by the anti-money laundering authorities in Uruguay. The central bank is studying if there is no problem with the investor, etc. So the discussion is, we have an obligation of financial inclusion and a financial exclusion for marijuana business or cannabis business. These are the law, but let me. When the problems arose in Uruguay, you say bancos privados started to close bank accounts to the pharmacies or to companies related to cannabis. Brum, which is the state bank, closes the accounts. It was a huge discussion in Uruguay, not only in Uruguay, in the US, in Spain, in Brazil. So what we can do? course, we need to, if the US passes a new law and change the federal laws saying that this is not narcotraffic, we solve the problem. But under Trump administration, I'm not so sure that his liberal face will show. I'm trying to be polite. However, the other day, the Treasury Director went to the Congress, and it says, okay, we need to find out a solution for the states, California, Colorado, etc., that are dealing with legal marijuana. So we need to allow a solution in order that the correspondent bank cannot have any penalties or fines for dealing with marijuana. It was the first time that I saw a light, because if the director of the Treasury is looking for a solution, maybe we can find a solution. But of course, as you may know, financial system deals with money and with risk. When you have risk, you need to have a lot of money in order to reduce the risk, or to say, okay, I can support this risk. Uruguay is a small country, nobody cares. So if we need more partners like Canada, like Portugal, like the American states, like Colombia, like Chile, like Paraguay, etc., because we are many countries in South America after our law at least are studying the possibility of having medical marijuana. And for us, we would like to have many countries with similar laws that we have, because it's the only way to see that the risk that the banks are dealing is compensated with a lot of transactions. So there is a saying in Uruguay that many times the money launderers uses banks, and the banks are not aware of what they are doing. One time that we need to have a legal marijuana, they say, no, this is too many risks. Is the word. So, and the problem is that the FinCEN, everybody knows what is the FinCEN. FinCEN is the unit of the intelligence unit of anti-money laundering in the US. Similar to the one that you can have here in Canada, or the one that are basically in all over the world. The FinCEN, and is still in act, passes a regulation that says banks can deal with cannabis if this cannabis came from a state that legalized the marijuana. So what the FinCEN said was, if there is a state that has legalization, you need to work with the financial system. That is a sign, at least, but this sign is not enough, because the banks are saying that I'm not sure if at the end of the day I will have a penalty from the SEC, from the Treasury, or from the Clinton list. So unless we have certainty, we are not going to deal with transactions involving marijuana. Of course, if we change the international law, fantastic. If the US pass a new law, fantastic. But until that point, we need international cooperation. We need to discuss this in places like this. We need to discuss with the governments, and we need to show that banks cannot be a break in this kind of laws. They need we are dealing with legal substance. This is legal in Uruguay, so it's legal under our perspective, the UN Convention. It's legal in some states in the US, in Portugal, etc. So we need to change the way the banks are thinking. That is impossible, unless there is a lot of money. So my final thinking and trying to give to Canada to you, not to Canada, some inputs in order to discuss this legalization process is be aware that at the end of the day, if you don't put the financial sector in this reform, you will not have a reform. It's awkward, it's cynical in certain way, but you need the banks, and you need the financial authorities to be involved in that. We didn't do that in the past. The financial authorities in this process were not involved, and now that is our major obstacle for the law. In 2014, I called the president of the central bank and said, we are going to have a problem with the law. No, don't care, I don't care. There is no problem. We have a major problem right now. Even the IRCA, which is a government authority, to open a bank account, they need to discuss that the money is coming from the budget of the government and not is coming from licenses that are approved by the IRCA, which is crazy. But to be optimistic, I would say that we have a great challenge in our reform. There was a major change in the way that we treat users and consumers. It was a major change in liberties, in inclusion, in social inclusions. And we have a lot of challenges, especially how to deal with the gray market, the black market, and the white market. I love to work in regulations, etc. The only way that you can regulate a market if the market is clear. If the market is clear, in order to be clear, you need to have banks. Otherwise, probably the black market is putting the money in the banks, and the white market is not using the banks. I'm sure that is happening right now. So, many thanks. Question? I don't know how many time you have, but questions?
Thank you very much. We do have time for a couple of questions. If you can go to the mics that are at either side of the room, I can take. Please be brief in your questions so that we can get maybe 2 or 3 in. Oh, I thought you were going towards the mic, sir.
Yes, my name is Mark Chenier. I've been involved in the hemp industry in Canada for the last 20 plus years. So I'm well aware of the things that you're talking about in that. So glad to see what you're doing with this, and looking forward to talking to you later. Thank you.
Hi, Don Leonardo, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very helpful. My name is Benjamin Campbell. I'm a consultant in the area of vapor products and cannabis. I was going to ask you, what has been the experience since legalization in Uruguay of the illegal market that existed prior to legalization? And to what extent has this switched over into the legal and regulated market? And have there been any policy changes, I believe I'm right in saying THC levels, for example, since the legalization?
The first one, the market, if you have cannabis in the pharmacies, the market is going down. If you have 1 week with no cannabis in the pharmacies, the black market is going up. But the prices are similar. It's incredible. The regulation of the market is fantastic. The black market and the white market depend on the supply. If you have supply, you can do it. We have a problem with the supply because there are only 2 growers with financial problems in order to put the money in the industry. But I would say that we are dealing with a black market. We have a black market. We have some confiscation of marijuana coming from Brazil or from Paraguay. I'm not a user, so I cannot say if one or the other is best. But what we have right now, that the black market is going to cocaine and to pasta base. Pasta base is a how you say pasta base? It's a derivative of cocaine with low quality and very addictive effects. The other one was how we control the THC. Okay, the IRCA controls that. I have a client that they make an import of seeds from Europe, from Switzerland, and the seeds was for hemp uses, and they, when the ministry controls the seeds, they say, okay, you can use it, and then when they have the flowers, it was 15% of THC. Okay, the judge in Paysandú, which is the north of Uruguay, wants to put him in jail for using seeds with other purpose. But at the end of the day, the ministry confiscated that, and there was no problem. There is a huge control in the IRCA, and in the project that they are basically the approved projects, they are controlling the percentage of THC.
Buenos días, señor. Mi nombre es Lisa Julie Khan, former political candidate and cannabis user. I have two three-part question.
Pick your favorite one.
Yeah, it's just it's not too complicated. Since legalization in 2014, I believe, in your country, what studies have you possibly done to notice the difference in crime rates and health rates? Like, have you seen any health impacts as well as criminal impacts in the two sections of the law, let's say?
To be honest, there are not too many studies on that. The studies that we have are basically on what they are media study, but they are not. We don't have until now crime study. What the Ministry of Interior, basically, the policy is saying that since the law, the crime or the trafficking in Uruguay changed a lot. They are not dealing with marijuana; they are dealing with cocaine and pasta base. There was a change, a swap in the market, but we don't have until now studies in users. What we do have is, and clearly when you have a black market that happens, before the law, there was a assumption that the 1% was the rate of users in Uruguay. We have 1% right now. But what is growing is the use of marijuana in teenagers. And the people against the law is saying that since the law was passed, the teenagers' rate of users is growing year by year. For me, that is not true. What is happening is, since it's not illegal, I can say I smoke marijuana.
The level of declaration of...
Absolutely. absolutely. But we don't have, until now, studies.
Hi, good morning. My name's Lisa Campbell. I'm with the Ontario Cannabis Consumer and Retail Alliance. I'm wondering, in your experience in Uruguay, if you would recommend a pharmacy model or a social club model, and considering that Quebec wants a not-for-profit model, is there a possibility of having cooperatives of microgrowers similar to social clubs that could have private storefronts?
To be honest, I was against the pharmacies because the discussion was, if this is a legalization, why I should be in a registry with my name saying that I'm going to consume marijuana? Who cares? If I drink a whiskey or a beer or I smoke tobacco, should I go to a registry to put my name? No. Why you are doing that? I think that I will not recommend that, especially in a society like Canada with social inclusion, etc., and with a lot of culture. I will say you don't need a registry for pharmacies or a personal registry. Then, if you, despite that fact of the regulation that needs registration, I would say pharmacy is okay, but without registry. Clubs are okay without registries. And self-growers are okay, and in that case you need registry. Because otherwise it could be narcotraffic or whatever. So I would say that I recommend the pharmacy, but with without the mandatory registry and this kind of personal abuse of information that the government asks. Even though I prefer the law that we have than the previous one. But if I, as a liberal, I would say, we don't need the names of the users. Why we need the name of the user? Especially if you think that the government can change. And a new government can say, I would like to see who was there, especially if you have a dictatorship or whatever. And in Latin America, we used to have them, we have. So I don't like the government asking the people, what are you doing? But at least the pharmacies as a way to sell marijuana in Uruguay is working. You can say, why pharmacies are not a supermarket? Because marijuana itself is not a medical product. It could be a problem that in a pharmacy you say you sell medical products and this is not a medical product. What is the message that you are giving to the people? So probably if you have stores, special stores, it could be better. But that depends on the country and on the culture of each country. Just to end. If today, last week, when I say that I'm coming here in Montreal, there was a journalist, and they say, please explain to the Canadians, if they are going to use pharmacies, they will have a long line, and they will freeze.